Welcome to Peacock Alley. This is Gary Eminent with your host, Dale Wetzel of the Legislature today. We are, this next hour is be sponsored North Dakota corn growers, so Dale will be having a busy time. But before we do that, Dale, we just should let all the listeners out there know that tonight is wing night. Right wing, left wing.
Corn-fed chicken.
Corn-fed chicken. Yeah, maybe it's, I would definitely think it's corn, especially North Dakota corn-fed chicken.
I would think it'd definitely be corn-fed chicken.
Yeah, much better. You can tell by the skin of a chicken if it eats corn. It's yellower than the white skin. I don't know if you know that. I'm a meat cutter, so
it's tastier.
That's something I know. They're plumper.
They're plumper and they're tastier.
That's correct. So the right wingers eat the wings naked. At least that's how they order them on the menu. And the left wings have them breaded with all the different sauces. Now, I like the naked wings anyway, but I would eat them that way if they were the left wings, so it probably doesn't matter. But
well, see, I do think that you should not draw any political conclusions from whether someone eats wings breaded or non-breaded. I mean, I think it could be possible to be a very dedicated right-winger and eat breaded wings, and also a raving Marxist-Leninist would eat naked wings.
I would guess that's probably more likely, actually.
Yeah, probably.
But anyway, we're broadcasting live from Peacock Alley. Peacock Alley, just for the listeners out there, was established in 1933, the year Prohibition ended. It's one of the oldest bars in the state of North Dakota, really before alcohol was even illegal in North Dakota.
Oh, it probably was going before 1933. They just weren't advertising it.
Did you know that the Patterson building was the national headquarters for the NPL?
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah, it's quite a building. If you haven't been here for a while, you want to go into the lounge. Last night I had, not in the lounge, but in the steak side. I had steak last night, and they've redone it with some, the way the lighting is, they got some great photos, and they've had 4 different presidents that have visited Peacock Alley, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And I'm not going to let you guess who they are. Maybe in the second half hour, Dale, I'll see if it.
Who was the last one?
Who's the last one? I'm looking at my list. LBJ.
It was LBJ?
JFK was here before him, so I guess.
Yeah. Well,
I'm guessing it would have to be the other way around. I think I got that.
Yeah. So
right.
I think if LBJ came here, I'm sure it was after JFK.
That's what I think.
If he was president, that is.
That's what I'm guessing. But they were president when they came, I believe. So we've had 4 of them. So anyway, Dale, what happened today at the legislature that was important that we want to look at today? I know there's been a lot going on. You talked about refinery diesel.
There was a news conference held at the Capitol today to announce the construction of a new diesel fuel refinery, and that was one of the events today. That had really nothing to do with the legislature. It was just a news conference at the Capitol with a bunch of legislators milling around because they were curious about what was going on.
I see. Taking credit for it.
This refinery will cost approximately $300 million to build. They hope to have it operating by the end of next year. It's being developed by MDU Resources Group and an Indiana company called Calumet, which is a developer of petroleum specialty products. And it intends to produce naphtha, diesel fuel, and other oil byproducts that are used in the production of motor oil, chapstick, WD-40 lubricants, those kinds of products. And we're talking about the production of 7,000 barrels of diesel fuel each day, which is about 1/8 of the total demand for diesel fuel in North Dakota on a daily basis.
Well, Dale, I heard that they're going to refine about 20,000 barrels, but actually produce about 7,000 gallons of diesel. And I think you said that current production is about 53,000 barrels consumed by North Dakotans in the state. So
that's right, and they hope to sell all of the diesel. And you know, the diesel is going to represent roughly 1/3 of the production they'll get from 20,000 barrels of oil processed per day. And they hope to sell all of the diesel fuel in western North Dakota. They expect to, and there certainly is demand for it. There's a lot of demand for diesel in western North Dakota, and it is growing and is expected to grow to almost 75,000 barrels a day by 2025.
I had heard there's about 12,000 semis a day driving to Bakken. That's the number that I think someone said they were working. That's the number of.
Well, since you're developing a travel center, I imagine you're paying very close attention to those kinds of numbers.
I am paying a lot of attention to that. We're trying to figure out how many we can support out there. So, but there's a challenge. There's just not enough diesel.
Another thing that happened during the legislature today was there were a series of abortion measures debated in the North Dakota Senate, including a constitutional amendment that is essentially it's a one-sentence amendment that says North Dakota will protect life and defend. Well, the word defend is not used, but protect life and recognize that it begins at conception. And this will be a very interesting electoral issue if this gets on the ballot in 2014. What this amendment does, one of its functions would be to make abortion illegal in North Dakota. It has passed the Senate. It will go to the House now. And if the House supports this amendment, if it votes to approve it, it will go on the ballot in November 2014. And as you know, Gary, as a political operative and junkie, 2014 is going to be kind of thin when it comes to stuff on the ballot. Yep. I mean, there's no governor's race, there's no Senate race, there's a race for Congress and a race for Attorney General and a couple of other down-ticket races, but there's not a lot of competition for attention on that election ballot. And if we have a constitutional amendment that would ban abortion, that's going to not only draw a lot of attention in North Dakota itself, but a lot of attention nationally, and we'll see what kind of consequences flow from that. Of course, I'm kind of assuming that this will get on the ballot, or I'm speculating that it will, and I think, frankly, its chances of getting through the House are better than even. And we will see what happens if that does indeed take place. Another thing that was discussed in the legislature today, in the House Government and Veterans Affairs Committee specifically, was a proposal to spend $3 million for a new governor's residence and conference center. Now, the governor himself says that the residence that exists, which is on the corner of the Capitol grounds in a ranch-style home that was built in the late 50s and has been occupied from 1960s onward, he said that the current residence is fine and that you don't need to spend 3 million clams to build another one. And we'll see how much his opinion carries sway in the House. But this proposal to spend this money on the new governor's residence has quite a lot of backing from Republican conservative budget Republicans who are normally conservative on budget matters. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of legs this idea has. And lastly, there was somewhat of a debate in the House Senate Appropriations Committee today about whether the chancellor should have office space in an information technology building on the University of North Dakota campus. Now, this issue kind of blew up last week because there were allegations that the chancellor had wanted this lavish office suite in this building with cherry wood paneling and amenities to die for. Well, it was very odd, frankly, to watch the Senate Appropriations Committee poring over floor plans of office space on a floor of a technology building at the University of North Dakota that's under construction. And the chancellor himself said, look, I don't need this office. I can use the cafeteria if I need to when I'm up at UND meeting with people. The reason that this is even an issue is that the Board of Higher Education, when they hired the new chancellor, Ham Shirvani is his name, they said that they wanted him to get out of town and they wanted him to go around to the various campuses and spend time there. And so he's trying to figure out, okay, when I'm spending 4 or 5 days at UND, where am I going to hang out? Where am I going to have meetings with people? And so they identified this space in the Information Technology Building that he might use for an office. And when he's not there, other people would use it for an office. And this became an issue when there were reports about what this office would look like. And it became, and he basically disavowed the need for an office. He, the chancellor, disavowed the need for an office at all and said, if you want me to meet with people in the cafeteria, that's what I'll do. And one of the reasons why this kind of blew up is that one of the members of the Appropriations Committee, one of the vice chairmen, his name is Tony Grinberg, he's a Republican from Fargo, he said that he's going to try to attach an amendment to the university system's budget bill to buy out the chancellor's contract for the next 2 years. Now, he has a 3-year contract. He's just finishing his first year. His first year will be done in June. he is paid $349,000 a year. So if you buy out the remaining 2 years of his contract, you're talking about 700,000 clams right there. And for someone to do no work for the university system. And we've had a couple of recent buyouts of top university administrators, including a previous chancellor who was basically sacked because he got crosswise with the president of the North Dakota State University at the time, Joe Chapman. And Joe Chapman, the chancellor at the time, Robert Potts, he, to paraphrase the song, he fought the Chapman and the Chapman won. And Mr. Potts had to hit the road. And there was quite a lot of consternation about, well, we have to pay this gentleman. We have to pay off this gentleman's contract, pay him to do no work, and actually have to, keep him on as like a consultant. That was the fig leaf that was used. But he was not consulted on anything. He was just said, okay, pal, you lost this one, hit the road. And it was a very embarrassing episode, frankly. And this one, if the legislature insists upon buying out the chancellor's contract, I mean, this has the potential of a whole omelet of eggs on the face of someone. And we will see how that plays out. But I must admit that, or I must say that my opinion was, watching this thing going on where we're talking about, okay, what does this office space look like, and where is it in the building, and how big is it, and it just looked so small.
What's funny is we got millions of square feet of office space in Bismarck alone. You got millions of square feet of space at the Unity campus,
and
we got a chance. We're paying $350,000 from worrying about a few thousand square feet for office. Now, couple quick questions before you go to our guest, Dale. Number one, the chancellor, is he based out of Grand Forks?
He's based in Bismarck. He's based in the state capital, actually.
I see. So that was a question. So having an office out of Grand Forks, that's one of them. Second thing is, if the governor's residence, so let's say the House and the Senate passed the money to spend and build the governor's residence, does the governor have to sign the bill, or can he let it go for a period of time and it becomes law, or if he doesn't sign it, does it not become law?
The governor can do any one of three things. He can sign the bill and it can become law. He can ignore the bill and it would become law without his signature, or he can veto the bill. Those are his options.
I'll bet when the conservative Republicans push this through, which it sure looks like it's going to become number two. Anyway, go to our
number
guest.
Two.
Meaning the governor's not going to sign the bill, so he doesn't have to endorse it and become law.
Yeah, that could be true. Although that's it could be true. I'm trying to remember the last time the governor actually did that. I think one of the famous examples of the governor doing that was Art Link, who abhorred gambling, let a charitable gambling bill become law without his signature because he didn't want to veto the bill. It had strong support, but he didn't want to sign it because of his personal aversion to gambling. Yep. And so he just let it roll. And he said later that he should have vetoed the bill. That and frankly, letting a bill become law without your signature is somewhat wimpish. I think I either cut its throat or sign it. Just do one or the other. Don't let it become law without your signature.
I don't know. Just wait and see. Just a thing to watch play out. So go ahead, Dale.
Well, we have gentlemen tonight from the North Dakota Corn Growers Association. And first of all, we have Mr. Michael Howe. He's the Director of Legislative Affairs for the North Dakota Corn Growers Association. We have Mr. Bart Schott, who is a corn farmer from Culm in south central North Dakota. He is a director of the Corn Growers Association. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Lilja, who is the executive director of the association. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good to be here.
What sort of issues in the legislature are the corn growers focusing on this year?
Well, primarily we do, naturally, we are farmers, so we want better roads. And there have been a number of rural road infrastructure bills that have been coming forth. And the corn growers are certainly in favor of increasing the funding for road infrastructure. For the novice person that doesn't know much about farming, corn production has dramatically increased in the last 15 years. We've seen statewide averages go from 90 bushels an acre to 130 bushels an acre. So we've got 40 extra bushels on every acre on average, of every acre grown in the state. And that's really taxed our road systems. And here we have a historic opportunity to fund and to upgrade some infrastructure.
And when we talk about the increase in yield, sir, 90 bushels to 130 bushels an acre, what's the reason for that?
Primarily genetic improvement and trait improvement. The first example of that was a thing called Roundup Ready. For years and years, farmers would spray Roundup. Roundup would kill everything. And in the mid to late 90s, scientists figured out how to put a Roundup trait into soybeans, and so you could spray the soybean crop and you could get every weed cleaned up and the soybean would survive. The big breakthrough in corn was a technology called BT. It was a natural occurring bacteria in corn. And so for years and years and years, farmers like Bart would spend their entire summer spraying their corn, trying to stop corn borer from damaging their corn. And scientists figured out how to insert a gene that's non-harmful to humans or anything else. The corn borers would eat that plant and it would kill them. And so what you saw was just a lot of less damage to the corn plant from this technology. Now in the last 10 years, you've seen the same type of technology with rootworms. So rootworms would always attack the roots and just devastate and destroy them. Well, now you've got that same type of technology that's in the root system. It makes for a healthier root. The rootworms, the minute they eat that, it kills them. It doesn't kill anything else. And
fascinating.
It really, in the last 15 years, it's just been a biotechnological breakthrough for agriculture.
So has it been mostly because of these genetic improvements, or has it been because also of like irrigation or something of that nature?
Well, we don't irrigate a lot of corn in North Dakota. I'd just like to add a couple of things to what Tom was talking about. Agronomically, we've had a real challenge of weed control in North Dakota because of our climate conditions. The chemicals that we had to use to control weeds in our corn were temperature sensitive and sensitive to humidity, and so it was like a real crapshoot to get really good weed control on corn. And so when Roundup came in, it made weed control just a breeze, and on my farm, we picked up about 25 bushels an acre just because of the Roundup weed control. The other thing that's happened is the national seed companies have really come to the plate and giving us varieties that we can grow in North Dakota that mature. They like to grow in cold soil. They'll germinate in real cold soil, and they've got really good seedling integrity. And so they'll pop out of the ground fast. They'll grow in our adverse conditions here. And then, of course, in the fall, we've got to beat that frost. And so they'll dry down real fast. They give us test weight and really good quality. And so, adding to what Tom said, it's made growing corn here in North Dakota a lot easier today than it was even 5 years ago. And you'll see that when you drive across the state, how the corn acres are spreading from, let's just use Wahpeton, to the northwest because of the traits that we have in the corn varieties today.
What are the corn regions of North Dakota, and how do they differ from where corn was grown 10 years ago?
Well, primarily when I got on the North Dakota Corn Board, it was primarily southeastern North Dakota, moving northwest across the state, and we had to help the corn growers get insurance products that would cover them. And so that was a big step up that we had done with North Dakota corn growers, working with RMA to get new blocks of counties that could insure corn in a profitable way, and so you wouldn't have to do it with a written agreement. You had a base yield to work off of, and so working with RMA, we've taken blocks of counties moving to the northwest so they could get crop insurance to ensure their profit.
And typically it's always, I think the heart of your question, it's more of a climate zone growing degree day unit is really how it spreads out. The southeastern part of the state, you can grow 100-day corn. You get up to Fargo, and you're already almost pushing 80-day corn. So the unique thing is, from the South Dakota border to Texas, you go from 100-day to about 115-day corn. From the South Dakota border to the Canadian border, you go from 100-day corn down to about 75-day corn. So as Bart points out, we've just got so much more of a challenging environment, just in that small 180-mile window.
What's the business climate right now for value-added projects for corn growers? And I'm thinking specifically about fructose production and also ethanol.
Well, ethanol has been another end-use commitment that we made with the ethanol industry and the ethanol plants to use our corn in-state. And just a few years ago, we were processing 60% of our corn into ethanol, and of course some high fructose corn syrup down at Wahpeton. And so that continues to build. And currently, I think we're using, if I'm not mistaken, Tom, about 40% of the crop goes into ethanol production. I think that we've kind of maxed out on that end of it. Exports are going to pick up. We've got a great rail system going out west, and so we're going to rely on that until we evolve something else in the industry to take care of our corn.
The gentleman you're listening to is Mr. Bart Schott. He's a director of the North Dakota Corn Growers Association. He's from Culm. We're also speaking this evening with Michael Howe, the Director of Legislative Affairs for the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, and Mr. Tom Lilja, who is the Executive Director of the association. We'll be coming back in a few moments to continue our conversation with these gentlemen about the corn industry and its prospects for the future.
Welcome to Peacock Alley. Gary Emineth and your host, Dale Wetzel. Dale, we got a lot of subjects to tackle in the next 30 minutes, so take her away.
We do. We have with us this evening Mr. Tom Lilja. He's the Executive Director of the North Dakota Corn Growers Association. We have Mr. Bart Schott, a Director of the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, a farmer near Culm, and also a former President of the National Corn Growers Association, which is quite an achievement. And we have Mr. Michael Howe, the Director of Legislative Affairs for the North Dakota Corn Growers Association. The Corn Growers Association is the sponsor of our hour tonight of the legislature today. And Mr. Howe, I understand the Corn Growers Annual Meeting is coming up shortly.
Yes.
Could you just tell us a little bit about what's on the agenda?
Yeah, it's coming up very quickly. February 20th, it'll be held in Fargo at the Fargo Holiday Inn. Great lineup of vendors. About 35 to 40 vendors will be there throughout the day. About 5 speakers lined up. Again, we have a breakfast right away in the morning. Tom, I believe it's at 7 a.m.?
7 a.m.
7 a.m. full breakfast, so show up for that. Of course, great lunch. Holiday Inn serves great food there.
Do you get any grits at breakfast?
What was on the menu? I think it's a Mexican-type breakfast burrito.
I'm just trying to think of a corn-based breakfast, and the first thing I thought of was hominy grits.
We do have corn, I know, on the menu, so
Absolutely.
that was a requirement for there. But yeah, we had a great turnout last year. Expecting the same this year again with our great crop we had last year. Hoping we can build on that. It's a great event right before spring planting gets in. Get the farmers out, get some ideas. We're looking forward to it. Should be a great time.
And you mentioned 35 to 40 vendors. What are the vendors doing there? What are they selling?
A lot of them are seed companies. They're out there getting their name out. They're advertising. We've got about 10 different seed companies. We've got steel building companies. Tom, what are some other vendors we've got? We've got just a whole host of different ones.
We've got, we've actually got a number of farm broadcast shows that show up and do their live broadcast through the day. As Michael mentioned, a lot of it is seed. Seed's a very competitive thing. We also have some chemical companies there that are selling their product. We have companies there representing ethanol plants that are buyers of corn. So you've got that interaction with the farmer. So it's just a very good day for the farmer to interact with a lot of suppliers.
Yep, and we've got a variety of different speakers as well. I know Leon Osborne from UND is going to give a talk on the meteorological forecast for this upcoming spring and summer. I know a lot of farmers are concerned whether we'll get out of this drought or not. I know Leon's got some great information he'll be able to present. Mary Podol from NRCS will be there. VJ Smith will also be there. He's the author of The Richest Man in Town. He'll be there giving a great talk. I believe that's over the lunch hour.
Yeah, we have a good speaker talking about the South American seed supply. His name's Ron Nelson.
Why is that an important subject?
Well, number one, because the U.S. had a drought this year, so seed production overall was lower than normal. And what happens in this business is a lot of these companies need to go to South America with their grow-outs right now. They hope to get them into condition and get them back into the United States before spring planting. So it's really a big deal this year. The second challenge we had is that we just had such a huge increase in corn acres in North Dakota. So, you took a 2.5 million acre crop. Now all of a sudden it's a 3.5 million acre crop. Plus, you had poor seed production based on the U.S. drought, and primarily because a lot of companies go south of zone when they do their seed production to take the risk out of it. So a lot of the corn that's produced for North Dakota is produced in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa, and they really had a bad drought scenario this past summer. So it will be a very challenging year for these companies to get the supply here in time.
Mr. Schott, I wanted to just ask you a general question about what is the state of the corn industry right now in North Dakota, and what is the state of the ethanol industry specifically?
Well, the state of the corn industry is in a growth mode that we have never seen before, and I would just like to add a comment about the seed stocks. Normally, we have about 25% of seed stocks carried over every year, and because of the increase in acres last year, all the warehouse corners got swept out and used, and we actually ran out of planting seed in 2012. And so we're hoping that the South American production comes back up, because I really believe that we're going to hit 4 million acres of corn in North Dakota. So I just wanted to add that comment as well. Be careful about the agronomics of some of the seed going in. To answer your question about the ethanol industry in North Dakota, it's a healthy industry. The plants that we have in our state are all state-of-the-art. Technology-wise, they can produce, if it's a 100 million gallon plant, they can go up to 150 million gallons if they want, or they can go back down to 80. And they aren't carrying a lot of debt. And so the ethanol plants in our state today are doing okay. Besides the fact of the byproducts that go out to the cattle industry here in state and up into Canada has been very well received. And so we're actually one of the only states in the union today that's looking at building another ethanol plant, and so the climate is real good for that industry.
What does the association do, if anything, to promote ethanol use in vehicles?
Well, we just came off a really hot program, and Tom, I'll let you give some details on it, but we got a blender pump program going with, of course, Governor Dalrymple, and that really caught on. I mean, the ethanol industry really benefited here. I know, Tom, why don't you share some of those numbers about gallons that we started out with before the blender pumps came in, and where they are today. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, prior to 2009, prior to the blender pump program inception, we were selling bulk about 275,000 gallons of ethanol a year, and when the state tax department classifies that, they classify that as E85 in a lump sum, so it could be a whole bunch of E10, but it's just all lumped as E85. After that program, the inception that was passed with the 2009 legislative session, the blender pump model allows consumers a choice between regular octane, E10, mid-level blends of E30, and then a gamut of E85. So when the consumer gets to the pump, he can actually choose based on market price. And you're going to have times of the year like this when ethanol is a little less competitive, but you're going to have times in the spring and the summer months when ethanol is much more competitive price-wise. And we have seen that number increase from 275 million gallon or 275,000 gallons to, I think it was 3 million gallons for the whole year. So it was very good.
One of the things that you hear about ethanol production is that somehow it drives up the price of food. And I wanted you gentlemen to address that because I understand there's quite a debate about whether that's actually the case.
There actually was a study that came out last spring that showed if ethanol was not 10% of the fuel supply, all of your gasoline would be costing you as a consumer $1 more a gallon. So you can make the argument that it increases food costs, but it's a baseless argument because what happens when crude oil and diesel costs and gasoline costs are higher? All these guys are shipping their products to the grocery store. They're all paying more for gas. They all pass on that surcharge to the grocery store, and the grocery store just passes it on in their products. So the real, I don't know, you'd call it lie or myth or whatever you want to call it, is this baseless argument that ethanol has caused food prices to increase. If you look at food costs since the 70s, it's a 1 to 3% increase per year, every year, year in and year out. And that hasn't changed even with ethanol in the last 10 years.
Well, and something I'd like to add to that is most consumers are a little bit tricked by that, because when you drive by a cornfield, most folks think that goes into a can of corn you buy at the grocery store or field corn you buy, in the fall, and about 94% of the corn we grow in the U.S. is for livestock feed, and so it's not the same. It's not a food versus fuel debate like the, and I'll say it, Grocery Manufacturers Association would like our consumers to believe, because there's so little of that type of food grown for human consumption that it just doesn't impact that part of the corn industry.
So here's the other deal. 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, what was our main mode of transportation and farm labor? Horses. So what did we feed to our horses? We fed a third of our corn crop to horses. Right now we're feeding a third of our corn crop to ethanol. So my question for the listeners is, in the last 120 years, what's changed? Nothing has changed.
Well, there's less horse poop, I imagine.
Well, there's less horse poop.
What sort of research is going on in terms of different ways to use corn, ways to utilize it as, say, a feedstock for plastics or something of that nature, or for ink, or whatever use is appropriate?
There's a lot of work done, oddly enough, by our land-grant universities. Well, not oddly enough, but they're doing the research with trying to come up with products that they can mine out of the corn before it goes through the ethanol conversion. And one of them is they've come up with a way to take the corn oil out and resell that through a process called reactive distillation. They're trying to get more products out of it while it's in the plant, and so you'll see more and more of these add-ons coming on as price dictates it. So
The one thing that we're guilty of is that we probably don't explain or advertise our industry very well. And what I mean by that is there's this common misnomer that all this corn goes into these ethanol plants and that it's all gobbled up, and that's not the case. The ethanol industry only wants the starch out of that corn. We don't want the protein. So that corn kernel is separated in the ethanol plant process, and a third of that corn kernel goes directly back into the supply chain in the form of highly concentrated protein, dry distiller grains for cattle. So number one, the argument that we're starving anybody is totally baseless. But again, we don't do a good enough job of explaining that. You've got the starch portion of the kernel. You've got the protein portion of the kernel. There are numerous projects looking at, you can make bioplastics out of corn. You've also got this whole supply of dry distiller grains coming out that supply chain. And there's a lot of research being done on how do we enhance feed efficiency with livestock. Actually they're looking at a human component of feeding that protein now. There's a lot of exciting research in those areas. So
they've got a de-icer now, Tom, that the airports can use, and we're starting to see that come around. It's kind of a green, if you want to call it a green de-icer that they can use at the large airports to take care of the
I'd rather have a de-icer made out of corn than out of petroleum products, frankly.
Well, absolutely.
We were talking about distiller's grain. Are there enough cattle in North Dakota to feed the distiller's grain too?
No.
Is that part of the development challenge here, is to get more livestock feeding operations in North Dakota so we can fill the cattle full of distiller's grain?
Absolutely. The livestock industry is really close to us corn folks, because they're the number one users of our whole corn. And so as the corn acres grow in North Dakota, we've been trying to work with the livestock folks to grow their industry here as well. And it's a challenge because, we want to see that industry thrive and make money and do well. And so there's a lot of room for growth in not only North Dakota but up in the upper Midwest here for the livestock producer.
And it's kind of interesting too on that point. You do hear a lot of the negatives from national livestock groups. Well, what's kind of happened, and where is the base of the National Cattlemen's Association? It's in Texas. Well, what's gone on in the Midwest? We have a whole bunch of ethanol plants that have been developed in the last 10 years. What's going on? There's this huge supply of dry distiller grains in the Midwest. So the competitiveness of feeding has actually shifted from Texas to the Midwest. And the guys that are the most vocal tend to be those guys from down south. And it's, you can make the argument all day that, ethanol is hurting the livestock industry, but you can also make that argument all day that in the Midwest, there is a competitive advantage to feeding livestock.
You think if I understand you correctly, you think the folks in Texas are griping a bit because there's cheaper sources of feed to the north? There's a cheaper source
of feed to the north.
Okay. And they'd rather keep the cattle down there and the jobs that come from.
Yeah, and we don't wish a drought on anybody.
Well, then also, we talk about our dry distilled grains, our DDGs is what we call them. The Asian market is really developing that, and they're really interested in our DDGs over there, especially the ones that are developed in the northern part of the country. They're resistant, or they survive better in, or they're able to handle, I guess, the humid climate of those Asian markets, which they just love. So again, we've got that factor playing in as well.
Bart was national president of the corn growers, and these southern states all have this fight with mycotoxin and aflatoxins in their corn, and we just don't get that this far north. We've been very fortunate, but a lot of that's our climate.
The Mr. Howe, as a legislative affairs director for the Corn Growers Association, to what extent the people you deal with, to what extent you have to explain the corn industry to them? Are they familiar with it?
It's it's getting a lot better. We just had a conversation last night. Over the past 5 years, what growth, not only just the North Dakota Corn Growers Association has had, but of course you're seeing it increased in acres across the state. I know Bart and I had this conversation last night, and just how big our organization has come. Just coming out to the legislature, talking to legislators. Again, it wasn't ethanol, corn. It was all still kind of new. We were the new kids on the block, and now, I think we're fairly well established of a commodity group and strong commodity group in North Dakota.
The North,
we're sensing that quite a bit.
The North Dakota Corn Growers also did a recent survey to a lot of our members, and as part of a strategic plan for the board, and it was very revealing. Guys that are Bart's age, not to pick on you, Bart.
My
but
age,
Bart, you look like you're 30 years old.
I'm over 21.
Okay. Yeah, you do look like you're legal to drink.
Yeah, I can.
Basically,
I'm over 21.
basically the guys that survived farming in the 80s, when these guys go by ethanol plants, they understand what an ethanol plant has done to their bottom line and how it's improved it. And they understand that the corn industry is a profitable industry and what it's done for their bottom lines. And, it was really good to see that. We've got a lot of data, of course, on the age of farmers and when they're planning on retiring, and some of that data is internal. But these guys understand that at the end of the day, ethanol is a very cheap source to add to the fuel supply, and it's got a lot of other uses for livestock and everything else. And these guys they've done very well with it.
Mr. Schott, I wanted to ask you, to what extent does the current situation in agriculture and in corn growing in particular, to what extent does it make it attractive for young people to get into the business?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I've got two sons on the farm with me, or coming back to farm. I'm not quite retirement age yet,
you're only 30 years old. I mean, come on.
So the corn growing in North Dakota has brought life back into the farm. These young guys, these young tigers, I call them, 25 to 35, they would plant all corn on every acre because they like it. They like the genetics that's going on. They like the background. I mean, there's a lot of support for corn. And so that's their number one crop that they want to grow. And so they've made the choice to do the farm planning for that. The other big growth is in our state is in precision farming, which goes along with row crop planting as well. And because of that climate, we've got young folks coming back to the farm. It's profitable. There are guys that are retiring and quitting farming, and so it's an attractive lifestyle to the youth today. I think that if we can get a farm bill passed that ensures a good insurance program that is not tied to conservation, that it's a standalone product where a young farmer today can go in and get the input costs from the banker that he needs, and he can prove to them because we've got a good insurance product. I think this ag industry in North Dakota is going to stay and get better.
How, Mr. Lilja, what do you hear about the willingness of young people to go into farming given our current climate in agriculture?
Yeah, I mean, Bart summed it up the best. We've got a number of board members on the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, and the one of the most satisfying comments I hear from any of those guys is, I am so glad for the ethanol industry and for the corn industry because I have a son or a nephew that are actually coming back to the farm, and if it wouldn't have been for the corn industry, I don't think these guys would have came back. And it means a lot to them.
Yeah. It's been very interesting because in the 80s, when I moved to North Dakota, I mean, you ask a farmer, do you want your children to go into the business? The answer was no. I mean, it's like, if my son goes into the business, I'm going to give him a saliva test because, he's nuts. But now, the things are looking up and it's much more attractive. Well, we have about a minute left. Gentlemen, anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
I'd like to talk a little bit about U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance. It was I was partly involved in that the year I was president of National Corn Growers, and that's where the 60 or 65 national ag groups came together to try and solve this food versus fuel issue and all the big items that we fight on a national level. The things we don't talk about are Farm Bill and ethanol. And if we keep those off the table, we've got a lot in common. And this has been a very successful movement to get the ag groups to speak in one voice and connect the consumer that has questions about food production today, whether it's livestock or cereal grains, connected back down to a farmer through the social media to ask these questions. And it's been a big home run. We've had a lot of success with this program. U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, it's coming on strong.
Do they have a website?
They do.
Well, you Google U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance?
Yeah, you'll get right on there. And we just chose 3 young producers, farmers, to be our spokespersons for this next year. And I had a chance to meet all of them in New York City. One is a gal from Illinois, and she's got a great story to tell. And so go to the website and check it out. You'll be very, very surprised.
The gentleman you've been listening to is Mr. Bart Schott. He's a former national president of the Corn Growers Association, and he's a director of the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, a farmer from Culm, North Dakota. We've been talking this evening also with Mr. Michael Howe, director of legislative affairs for the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, and also Mr. Tom Lilja, the executive director of the association. Thank you, gentlemen.